So I'm sitting here re-editing this video, smoking a cigarette, and I realized something. The whole reason why I'm sure most people won't even watch the entirety of this video is because our lives don't mean absolutely anything to anyone until it affects them personally. What is going on, everybody? Asshole Veteran back with another video, and today we're going to get into the truth behind why veterans are suicidal and homeless and don't seek treatment. You know, I take this personally. Since my time on active duty, I have been homeless 3 times. I've been suicidal more times than I have fingers and toes. And I actually just had a really long discussion with a very good friend of mine, actually an ex-girlfriend, but a very good friend of mine who's a paramedic in Milwaukee, and she got to see the development of where I've reached today and how these issues came up and how I learned to deal with them and adjust them and things like that. Now, this experience has given me a lot of insight that most people wouldn't have. It's given me insight into things like programs through the VA and treatments and what works and what doesn't work. And it even in the end of 2015, beginning of 2016, it allowed me to rewrite the inpatient Milwaukee VA protocols for veterans in crisis. Now, I'm not saying I'm a genius, and I'm not saying I have all of the answers, but there are a few things that I know that at least provide a good starting point. There's a couple of things that people who really say they want to help veterans don't quite understand in the process of this, okay? Even in situations where veterans are the ones helping to develop these programs and things like that, they reach into communities where they're veterans that have stability. They're veterans that have something in their life that helps them move forward. Well, here's an astounding number for you, okay? 21.8 million veterans in this country. That's 5.7 veterans for every square mile of the entire country. Out of those 21.8 million veterans, 5.5 million are living at or above poverty level. That's about 1 in 4 veterans is not in danger of losing their home or capable of feeding their family or something like that. And a lot of these folks that are jumping in and going, hey, we need to find a solution, are the folks that are in that 25%. Sure, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they may have been in probably the high end of that 75%, but they're not anymore. So as times change, that understanding has to change and that reality has to change. How do I know this? Because I go through it. It wasn't too long ago that I personally was living in my truck because I lost my home and everything in it. So let's get to this, and we'll just run down the list. I have the list here in front of me, and we'll just rip everything to shreds from top to bottom because I am so pissed off about all of this. I'm so tired of everybody going, oh, we need to find a solution, and then never bothering to listen to the people who actually have the solutions. Okay, first and foremost, benefits. Let's discuss the reality of the benefits. The reality of the benefits say that 1 in 8 veterans that goes to the VA actually gets decent care. 1 in 8 veterans that gets decent care. I personally have been waiting 12 years now for hearing aids. I've got a friend here in town, a fellow vet. He got them in less than 2 months. So the standard of care at the VA hospitals is not the same across the board, regardless of how they want to play it or how they want to twist it. Okay, I dealt with a veteran not too long ago who was in crisis and suicidal. He was scared to death because he had to have hip surgery. Well, this was right at the same time I walked into the VA, and the VA told me that I was too young to have hip surgery, so I should probably consider using a wheelchair. The veteran that I was helping through crisis is a decade younger than me. So when you talk about healthcare, I mean especially healthcare, more so than anything else, there is truly not a standard to be met. It's something that people go, oh, well, you know, we've got a couple of people with good experiences, so obviously something's going right. And they never pay attention to the other 7 out of 8 that are going, holy shit, I'm afraid to go to the doctor because what it means if I go to the doctor, they're just going to pump me full of meds or they're going to completely ignore me and put me off. Let's talk about financial benefits. Let's use the one thing that I've dealt with more often lately than anything else. Okay, let's use the Veterans Homebuyer Program. There's a program right now that says that a disabled vet can get a certificate to buy a house for up to $477,000. That number may have fluctuated a little bit, but it's right around $475,000 they can get guaranteed to buy a home. Now, granted, you still have to meet credit requirements and things like that, and that's just the one on the federal level. Every single state in the country has a veteran homebuyer program that allows veterans to be able to buy a house. Again, more than $250,000 house, and all the veteran needs to do is have a certain credit score to be able to qualify. But most of these veterans that are dealing with financial crisis that'll never be able to buy a house, they're actually in debt less than the price of a decent used car. So sure, the benefit is there. It's impossible to use. And nobody's developing a program that says, hey, you know what? Let's actually help them out of a chaotic crisis situation and help them move forward. They're just going, hey, I don't understand what the problem is. These programs are there. Why aren't you using them? Let's talk about veterans in rural communities. Okay, let's talk about, if I go to a city right now, if I move to a city right now, I can go to any number of car lots that'll go, you know what, you're a veteran, there's certain programs that allow us to give you financing accordingly and things like that. But as a veteran in a rural area, if my truck breaks down and I can't fix it, well, what's my solution? I don't have any of those options. Those VA programs, whether it's state or federal VA programs that would help me with buying a car so that I can do things like take care of my family, get to and from medical appointments, things like that, well, those programs don't exist out here. Consistently over the last 5 or 6 years, every single veterans-related resource in my area has been dwindling. They've been pulling funding for this and pulling doctors for that, and you know, we can't afford to have this outreach office there for the state DVA, and you know, we can't afford to have these doctors at this community-based outreach clinic because you know, doctors actually want to get paid what they're worth, and so it constantly falls apart. But then they turn around and direct tons of overage funding into the major hospitals and completely forget about veterans in rural areas. So, sure, on paper, these benefit programs look absolutely amazing. But the truth is for the vast majority of veterans, for 3 out of 4 veterans, they're completely useless. Let's get into treatment, shall we? Treatment is one of my favorite subjects. It's something that I constantly battle. It's something that I constantly fight about. It's something that I have constantly worked to change. And nobody wants to hear it. Why is it nobody wants to hear it? Because these folks go and get their degrees and they pat themselves on the back and they talk about, you know, well, this book says this and so said they did a research paper on that, but nobody actually brings in the people who are actually in crisis. Nobody looks at somebody and goes, hey, you know what, you're suicidal, let's figure out how to help you right now. Which is actually the exact opposite of what I do as a minister. As a minister, when somebody is in crisis, that's when I walk in and go, hey, you know what? Let's get this all squared away for you. Let's find a way just to make it till tomorrow, and tomorrow we'll figure out tomorrow. What it is these folks get this idea that it's all peaches and cream because, yes, they're a veteran, and yes, they may have this disability, but, you know, they have a certain standard of life, so they don't understand why everybody can't meet that certain standard of life. And then they go, well, why don't you just go ahead and go into treatment? Well, the truth of the matter is treatment is the worst possible situation for the vast majority of veterans. It actually increases the likelihood of suicidal ideologies amongst veterans. Why? Because treatment entirely focuses on the negative in order to try and make them comfortable with the negative so that they can build a positive. I don't know about anybody else, but my favorite thing in the world, and something that just causes more damage than anything, is having to sit around and do nothing but focus on that trauma. I spent 6 weeks in the VA trying to find help for my trauma. And the young lady that I was speaking with just a few minutes ago says, you know, you were 10 times worse when you came out of the VA than you were when you went in. And you were in horrible shape when you went in. She was there when I rewrote the inpatient protocols for the Milwaukee VA to try and gear everything towards actually being able to try and help veterans. But we're still dealing with things like cognitive processing therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, where the whole purpose of it is to do nothing but relive that trauma over and over and over and over again. And when that doesn't work, the solution is to do like they did with my buddy Doug, and pump people so full of medications and pills and everything else that it permanently causes damage. And then they go, we don't understand what the problem is. We don't understand why it's not working. Well, it's not working because your entire treatment model is screwed. Treatment causes more damage than good. And the people with the fancy degrees don't want to hear from people like me who sit back and go, you know what? The problem with your treatment is you're not listening to the people who are going through it. And you're not working to actually fix it. Housing. Let's talk about housing. Housing goes back to that financial thing yet again, but it's a really interesting topic. Okay, right now I live in a decent home. Not a great home, a decent home. It's small, it's expensive. I pay way too much in rent. I've got screws that are backing out of the walls from the water that's running down between the walls, and you know, I am not overly happy with the place where I live. My son's not allowed in the kitchen because I've got cabinets that are starting to fall off the walls. Why does that make a difference? Well, the reality is even myself, who looks out for my children on a regular basis and does everything to try and build a safe environment for them, I constantly think to myself, you know, as much as is falling apart around me, as much as everything is coming just undone, I would feel better living in my truck in the woods, way away from everybody, and being the garbage that everybody pretends that I am anyway. So what's the point in having housing if I can't do the repairs that need to be done? What's the point in having housing if I can't make it a comfortable environment for me and what I go through and how I need to adjust my life after my service? What's the point in trying to function where the only thing it does is continue to cost me not only financially, but the excessive amounts of stress of things like when I cook dinner, I have to sit around and worry about if that cabinet's going to break off the wall and fall on me, and I'm not going to be conscious enough to be able to take care of my 7-year-old son who's going to freak out because dad's hurt and he's not responding. So yeah, housing is definitely an issue, but it's an issue, again, nobody really takes the time to truly look at. Because it's simple. Oh, well, they've got a place to live. It's no big deal. I don't know how many times I heard that in the last place I lived, where I had black mold coming through the walls and caving in the ceilings, where my son and I lost absolutely everything we owned. I'll tell you what, the month that I spent living in my truck after that was probably one of the greatest months I've had since I got out of the military. Why? Because I didn't have to stress about it. Because I didn't have to rely on somebody else to make my life okay. Why don't veterans go to housing? Well, there you go. Courts and cops are another huge one. I mean, absolutely huge. If anything happens where we have to go stand in front of a judge or we have to deal with the cops, the fact that we're a veteran is automatically a strike against us. Now, fortunately, I personally live in an area and have dealt with a lot of these cops during like crisis intervention and things that they actually have a very good standard on how they treat veterans and folks with post-traumatic stress and people in crisis and things like that. They're absolutely amazing human beings. But on average, anywhere across the country, you know, like here in Wisconsin, we got that little veteran identifier that can go on our license. I don't want that on my license. Why? Because I know if I get pulled over for speeding or something like that, as soon as they see that little veteran identifier, I'm automatically the bad guy. I'm automatically a risk. God forbid they actually find out that I'm doing something like carrying a firearm for self-defense or something like that. I've had a number of interactions with law enforcement where I've been carrying a firearm, and most of the time they're okay because most of the time it's up here. Outside of that, I've been all over this country. And I can name in my entire life one time as a veteran where I ended up interacting with somebody from law enforcement where my veteran status was not held against me when it came out. Just once. The same thing goes with judges. if I have to get in front of a judge, I mean, God forbid anybody find out I'm a veteran, especially a veteran with any kind of mental health issue like post-traumatic stress or anything like that, because we're automatically some kind of violent rage beast that's going to take out a small town. When the reality is we're just people who hurt. And generally we hide that hurt from everybody because we don't want it used against us. We end up with things like losing our children. We end up with things like exceptional amounts of alimony. I mean, even though federal law says that veterans' benefits can't be used during a alimony or child custody hearing, every single state in the country violates that federal law and still uses those protected benefits to charge the veteran excessive amounts of child support and everything else. Again, not just something I've dealt with other people through, but something I've dealt with myself. Matter of fact, not too long ago, I was having a good long discussion with my buddy Josh, another Marine. I wasn't a Marine, he was a Marine. Let's not even get into it. But he's living in a situation where he's all by himself, and he's paying so much in child support because of his veterans' benefits that he can barely afford to live. It's freaking disgusting. And it's a violation of federal law, but nobody's stepping into these minor courts and going, hey, you know what, we got to stop doing this because it's actually against the law. And of course, we don't have anybody like, I don't know, Congress or the House who supports veterans so much that are willing to actually push through things like the Veterans Disability Protection Act of 2010. They let that one ride, you know, just throw it away because veterans don't really mean that much, especially when it comes to standing in front of a judge or dealing with the cops. Relationships. Relationships are awesome. I just did a video about relationships. I absolutely love the dynamic of all the different kinds of relationships. Friendships, you know, my relationship with my son, my romantic relationships, all those kinds of things. But what happens when a relationship even starts to go rocky? People even start to argue about anything. It's automatically that the veteran is some kind of scary and they're a danger and everything else, and God forbid the cops get involved because the veteran, regardless, you know, you could show up and the veteran is cut up and bleeding and everything else, and you know what? He's going to go to jail or she's going to go to jail just because she's the veteran. Because she's automatically the aggressor. So, God forbid any relationship have any type of troubles whatsoever, because even in something as small as a minor argument, it just turns into you're irrational because you're a veteran. You're irrational because you've got post-traumatic stress. You're irrational because serving your country messed up your head. And then, of course, things like, I don't know, friendships. You have to deal with friendships where you come back from military and everybody's like, oh, well, were they in Afghanistan or you know, what was going on with them? You know, let's not treat them like the same person. Let's sit back and relax and see what kind of people they are now. Well, you know what? Serving your country does change you. It makes you a better person. It makes you care about the person next to you more than you care about yourself. That's not a bad thing. But for some reason, if we, I don't know, go out to the bar or something like that, people sit back and they treat us differently because of the fact that we served our country. They treat us like we're of less value. Like we're some kind of animal that's just waiting to be uncaged. It's absolutely disgusting to sit back and watch how few people actually have supportive relationships around them. Organizations are at the top of the list of people who treat veterans like absolute garbage. Every single organization I have ever seen, it doesn't matter if it's major national organization or minor homegrown organization, every single one of them puts $1 before a life. Every single one of them. I've had veterans organizations tell me that I have to sit at a table with rapists and pedophiles because they're active members in good standing. I've had them flat out tell me that if I don't like it, then I need to leave the organization because I have no place there. So somebody who would do damage to the very people that I would give my life to defend, I'm supposed to be all buddy-buddy with because they paid their membership dues, and you know, that's more important than anything. Membership dues are more important than anything. I just went through it recently with 2 different organizations. One did martial arts-based therapy, made $4.3 million in donations over the course of 3 years. And at the end of that 3 years, they put up a big sign on their Facebook page that was bragging because they spent $400,000 $400,000 over the course of that 3 years on helping veterans. Another organization just recently I was supposed to do public speaking for, and I got to a place where I was in crisis, and their response was, well, it doesn't matter if you're in crisis. We don't want you to do the public speaking because we don't want you to say something that would upset our sponsors. They told me flat out, and I actually recorded it, they told me flat out that their concern was whether or not I was going to do something that would keep somebody from writing a check. At a point in which I was in crisis, where I was at my end. That was their response. The only organization that I have ever seen in the last, well, let's see, when did I get out? I got out in 2003. So in the last 16 years, there's a total of one organization I've actually seen that actually makes an effort to help veterans. Just one. And that's the Wounded Warrior Project. And everybody gives them a bad rep because it's like, oh my God, did you hear about that one guy and what he did with all the money? Well, he's sitting in prison now. But I'll tell you what, I've been with the Wounded Warrior Project for over 10 years, and they've never missed a birthday. They've never missed a Christmas. They've never gone more than 90 days without somebody calling me or emailing me and going, we just want to check on you and make sure you're doing okay. Is there anything you need? Is there anything you can help with? Matter of fact, I called them up not too long ago because I had an alumni hat for years that they had sent me, and I lost it in the house with black mold. And they didn't even bat an eyelash. They sent me a new hat. They sent me a nice workout shirt to go with it. You know, they've called me 3 times since then to make sure that I had my home needs and that I was capable of getting food and things like that. They gave me resources to try and get my truck fixed, and if I couldn't, they gave me resources to try and get a new truck. I mean, it really is the only organization I have ever seen. Sure, they take in lots of donations, but they actually do lots of help in the process. Finances are the single most devastating thing outside of relationships that veterans deal with. And I've said this before, I've actually got another video up on YouTube that's all about finances and its integration with post-traumatic stress and all that kind of stuff. But let me tell you the truth about finances, okay? I didn't ask to be a veteran on disability. I spent 2 years in my car living across the street from the regional office in Milwaukee. I got so well known there that the lady at the front desk would bring in extra lunch because she knew I'd be coming in to sit down and wait for somebody to help me. I went in there looking for a job. The job that they said they would try and help me get after I came home. I didn't ask for disability or anything like that. I didn't want disability or anything like that. I just wanted a job. But I spent 2 years living in my car before the people that I had become friends with were able to get me to a point where I could actually get off the streets. And they were fighting as hard as I was. But word up on top says, you know, we got to do it this way, so I had to fight to get my benefits in the first place. Now that I have my benefits, I'm constantly fighting to keep my benefits. I have to do reviews and everything else in spite of the fact that they tell me flat out that I'm individually unemployable, that I'm permanently and totally disabled. I still have to go through reviews to see if I'm still permanently and totally disabled. It's ridiculous. Why does that make a difference? Well, because first we have to catch up from the fact that we were at absolute zero. Then we have to deal with the fact that everybody wants a piece of those veterans' benefits. And not just the courts and the child support and that kind of stuff, but I mean, God forbid, you know, everybody who needs a loan or wants to give you a loan or something wants a chunk of that veteran's benefit. And it doesn't take long before interest rates go through the roof. The next thing you know, somebody can't even afford to feed their family. I can't even tell you how many times I've had people brag to me about how they finally got approved to go to the food bank and actually get food for them and their families. I had a guy that was excited that he actually finally got enough food from the food bank to be able to sit down and have an actual meal with his family. The second to largest effect that veterans have to deal with in their day-to-day lives that helps contribute to things like homelessness and the refusal to seek treatment and so on and so forth is actually their families. And a lot of families, they're like, oh no, that couldn't possibly it. You know, I'm supportive and everything else. Well, think about it. Think about it just for a second. I can't even tell you the number of veterans that I've sat on the phone with or sat online with or visited with face to face that tell me about how their families, you know, will sit there and be so supportive in front of everybody else and then go, oh, well, it's because there's something wrong with them. So even at home, even sitting around doing nothing, we constantly have to hear about how there's something wrong with us and everything is our fault and so on and so forth. And people don't even realize that they do it. People don't look at us the same anymore. I know I've said that 100 times during this video, but it's the truth. People just don't look at us the same anymore after we serve our country. So why would I go and get treatment so that it justifies my family's thoughts that I'm not okay, that I'm not normal? Why would I bother to continue to fight to save a home for a family that's been working to trash me since I came home? Why would I fight to build a future when I'm just being thrown away like garbage anyway? Why would I bother to continue to live if I'm so worthless that even my own family doesn't see me as a regular human being anymore? And then one of those things that generally only applies to folks with post-traumatic stress, but something that actually does kind of run the gambit as it is collateral trauma experiences. Okay, somebody goes through, say, a particularly nasty child custody hearing, and they lose their children. Okay, and I've seen this with both male and female vets. They lose their children just because of their military service. I've literally watched and seen court commissioners and judges look at veterans and go, you know what? I'm concerned about whether or not that child is safe anywhere near you, in spite of the fact that you were on your way to becoming a police officer. I'm still concerned about the safety of your own child anywhere near you, even in spite of the fact that that child has been safe its entire life up until now. I'm concerned about the safety of that child being anywhere near you. And after a while, it gets to the point where it's far more traumatic than anything we experience while we're on active duty. If you're gonna sit there and talk about a specific identifier for things like suicidal ideologies, I'll tell you from experience, losing kids is it. The single worst experience of my entire life was having my daughter ripped from my life because of the fact that I'm a veteran. I've watched these same judges and court commissioners make these decisions and then go, oh yeah, by the way, thanks for your service. Like that's supposed to fucking mean something. You know, the reality behind all of these things is everybody who sits there and screams up and down about how they want to do something for vets and they want to help find solutions for all this, you know what? Stop looking to each other for an answer. Just because you have an education doesn't mean you have an understanding. Just because you hear the voice of a couple of people that might know one or two things doesn't mean you know how to fix it. Doesn't mean you can even start down the path. I don't have close to anywhere near the number of answers we need to actually be able to completely fix all of this. But I'll tell you what, I've been through thousands getting to a point where I'm at a starting point. So you can pat yourself on the back all you want and sit there and brag about how you're trying to do something, but the truth of the matter is as long as you're excluding the people who are actually in crisis and actually dealing with this every single day, you're not doing anything but patting yourself on the back. And you're never going to save lives, and you're never going to fix homelessness, and you're never going to create any solutions to any of these issues. Because the people who matter don't matter as much as what you decide you need to do because it matters. I'm fucking done. Hope y'all have a good day. Hope good things happen for you.